there, Natalie.
Oh, hey there, Justin.
We're not in a studio.
No, we're not. We're at a convention.
We are at a convention. Hey there. Welcome to an interesting episode. This is a little different. Instead of us playing a game, we're going to walk around a room while other people play games, and we're going to talk to some people who have made games that we play.
And watch them play games and whatnot.
Yeah, so specifically, welcome here to BreakoutCon. Or is it just Breakout? BreakoutCon is the website, and I think it's just called Breakout. It's a convention.
Breakout as a name, I think, has been taken by something else, so I think they've had to go with BreakoutCon to some extent.
So we are at Breakout. And it's a annual tabletop convention here in downtown Toronto at the Sheridan Centre.
Yep.
And it was kind of neat. The organizers contacted us and said, we have media passes for you. And then I went, have you listened to the show? And they went, not really, but could you talk to some people who have played games? And I went, I would love to do that. And so obviously Breakout is very desperate and have
clearly
lowered, and have brought us in a last-ditch effort to help just save everything. They've asked us to come and save the show. So this is the Terrible Warriors Save Breakout.
Obviously.
They don't need our saving at all. This place is doing fine.
They don't realize they need our saving. No, they don't at all.
So here we are. We, like all good Terrible Warrior shows, we're going to improvise this.
Completely.
We have a number of names, a number of people, and over the next hour, you're going to hear their voices as they talk about the games they've made and the people that are helping out this show and maybe even running these games. And so come along with us for a journey of the mind as like an invisible ghost at Breakout.
It's going to be an adventure.
It's going to be such an adventure.
Oh, God.
Come with us, shall you?
My name is Mark Richardson. I run a game company called Green Hat Designs, which is also a cartography company. I do freelance cartography and map design for RPGs. I'm doing all the cartography for the second edition 7th Sea role-playing game, which I won an ENnie for during last summer.
We finished a run of 7th Sea last year. We were just bragging about it just a minute ago, that our characters loved the maps that came out of it. So
so I did all of those. So yeah,
that's amazing.
And then I also got into game design. I published my first book a couple years ago called Headspace. It's a Powered by Apocalypse hack where you all have shared consciousness in cyberpunk dystopic future. You're all like hyper-competent badass heroes who are fighting corporations. And basically, the main core shtick of the game is that you each have 3 skills that you're really good at, and your networks, your brains are all sort of networked together, so you can use another player's skill to do something in the fiction, but when you do so, you pull their emotional baggage that they have related to it along for the ride.
Oh, so like Pacific Rim's Drift and
it's all like that kind of thing. So what happens is, like, there's sort of 5 emotions, like rage, grief, fear, need, ego, that are tied through character creation to each of your skills. And then when you use a skill, if you use your own skill, you just say what happens and you kick butt. But if you use another player's skill, you'll be like, okay, I'm going to use engineering to solve this problem. But when you do that, you roll the dice, and if you roll high, then you can do what you want, and if you roll low, you can always succeed in the game. So the game doesn't let you fail, but it's basically complicated success. So you get sort of emotional complications. So if it was like
success
rage
at a cost.
Yeah, so it would be like you would have like if you had like a rage complication, it could be ignore an ally or resource or something like that. And so then you take that and narratively bring it into your fiction about fixing the problem but ignoring somebody else's problem because you're angry about them or resentful or something like that.
Well, that's crazy. That's really cool, though.
Yeah. So it's been doing pretty good. I ran a Kickstarter that was fairly successful, and I'm just working now on an expansion for that book, where it's essentially a setting book of 7 very different cyberpunk dystopias written by different authors, and everything from sort of like post-World War III Neo-Tokyo to like uplifted whales in an undersea environment and stuff like that. So that's going into layout right now, and I have to finish maps for it because I'm doing my own game, so I have to do. So I'm like, well, of course I'm going to do maps for my own game, but then you get to that point where you're like, oh man, I got to do this.
It sounds like you don't have enough to do. It sounds like you don't have enough to do. Shout out to our Ontario, to our Ottawa developers as well.
Yeah, and there's a whole ton of us in Ottawa, like Jason Pitt, Emily Griggs. I can't remember everybody's name right on the spot.
Sure.
For some reason I'm blanking, but there's a whole crew of us, and a lot of us are here at Breakout because it's for the first time I find like I go to a lot of American conventions like Gen Con or Dreamation or Metatopia, and this is like one of the first bigger Canadian conventions where they're coordinated. They have a lot of new people, and they also have a lot of designers up from the U.S. who are up here and running their games and talking on panels, and you're kind of getting that outside of our bubble kind of perspective. So.
Yeah. Way closer to home, too.
This is so much cheaper to fly, too.
So you put your game on Kickstarter, so yourself, like you published it yourself. You didn't go through one of the.
Yeah, no, I did the whole Kickstarter thing, and self-published and whatnot, and
How was that? How was that as a process?
It was exhausting.
I can imagine that.
It was Kickstarter is, it's 30 days you'll never get back. It's
That's fair.
It is really good. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen, and I kind of had everything designed for okay, what's the minimum I need to do, and then it went really well. So my goal was 4,000 Canadian, and I ended up with about 28.
Oh wow.
So.
Really
nice so by the end of it, I had enough to do an offset print run, print 1,000 books, and I had a lot of misadventures in shipping and stuff like this, but this was just bad luck. But it's been a really interesting experience. And then I don't know, Kickstarter is kind of the way you go for just about everything. Unless you can get published by somebody else.
Unless you can get in with a publisher, but otherwise you manage all the marketing, all the distribution, and everything.
Yeah, it's the job of billions.
And the map drawing.
It's the job of a billion hats.
I was gonna say.
But I find a lot of it is, as a small publisher, is to find out the things that you're good at, and then do a thing like a Kickstarter with the plan of. Okay, I'm going to use the money from Kickstarter to pay for an artist or to
outsource certain areas.
Yeah, exactly, right? I can do some of these things, but I find sometimes, especially you get into a situation where you're just because you can do something, if you do everything, it will take forever to do, and I do all this.
You'll probably die trying, too.
Yeah, and I do all this on the outside of my day job, so, it's not a full-time gig for me, so it's all off the side of my desk kind of thing. Yeah. So,
what is your day job, out of curiosity?
My day job, I work for Environment Canada, and or Environment and Climate Change Canada, and I do cartography there, so I do professional map design for the federal government.
So maps are your life.
Maps are my day job. That's my bread and butter. And
we could do a whole episode just on. Let's talk about maps for RPGs. That is real fascinating. Headspace looks beautiful. It's been on my short list for a while. I mean, we can only do one game a month, and so things just we get around to it. But I love the setting. I love the concept. I love the artwork. Yeah. Where can the listener find?
The best place to get a print copy is probably Indie Press Revolutions, because I keep most of my copies there. I think I have about 100 or so left before I have to reprint it or something. And you can get digital from Indie Press Revolutions, but it's probably more people are familiar with getting a digital copy at Drive-Thru.
Drive-Thru RPG. We'll put a link on Terrible Warriors, so we'll send it out there. I hope we talk again about those maps. That's really, really, really neat.
I'd be happy to talk anytime about maps. Is kind of the thing I do, so it's an easy thing for me to talk about.
I've seen your game room, Natalie. You've got the Forgotten Realms map, laminated, so you can draw across it as you're playing the game.
Markers on it, so you can make notes and stuff.
Just going through the 7th Sea, for example, I just loved poring over the details of the maps and the trade routes and all the little notations and everything that went through.
Time at all.
It looked like it just wrote itself.
It's been big. I'm working on for 7th Sea. I was brought on in a pretty unique situation to essentially create a whole world with the writing team, and so because of the huge success that the Kickstarter had, they were like, okay, I started with doing Thea, and then they're like, okay, well, let's keep going, and then it was Crescent Empire, and Free, which isn't out yet, but it's done.
You helped with the Pirate Islands?
Pirate Islands and Pirate Nations, and did Out of Bay and Sea. Then we did Aslan, which is the most recent to publish.
Yeah.
And then the one that I'm working on right now, which is almost done. We just have like some final names and feature names and stuff like that. But it's basically this is the Colonies expansion. So essentially, it's the parallel to North America.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, their version of the New World.
Yeah, like there's the New World in 7th Sea is South Central America kind of thing, and then so this is like the American colonies equivalent kind of in terms of that area, but in keeping with the same tradition that we've had is make it. The goal of the maps was all to make you, if you look at it on a wall, you go, oh, that is Europe or whatever, and then as soon as you look at
the serial numbers filed off,
and then as soon as you look at it, you're like, wait a second. And then it changes a lot from that. It's been a really amazing experience because like I've got to work with the writers on every single of all of their different books, and we sort of work as like this swirling vortex of creation where the writer's initial idea is create the base of the map that I work on, and then the map eventually gives the writer's ideas, and it kind of goes back and forth.
Even just when we're looking at our own adventures, going like, okay, well, we want to take us to Avalon, but that means going through these nations on the way because we've got this like map that grounds us as we're going through. Like, well, hell, let's see what happens to our characters on our trip through Montaigne because that place is nuts. Our game, we were on the edge of Castile, and we realized, crap, we got to get out of Dodge. But looking at the map, we were able to convince the GM to let us. It's a short channel trip across to Montaigne. If we get a boat, we can get a boat. If we get some under the radar boat who's willing to sneak us out in the night in the fog and get us across the channel over to Montaigne, we can shepherd everyone out of here rather than these insane mountains where we're going to be chased by the Inquisition for months. But that kind of strategy and storytelling might not have come out had it not been for a grounded map to run with. I love hearing stuff that people, it's great when, I hear about stuff, having fun with the maps I made and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a really rewarding experience. And so this is when I'm finished the colonies, that'll be the last map for new continents for the core 7th Sea Kickstarter, and then I do one map after that, which is sort of like bringing them all together. So putting Thea, Crescent Empire, a free Aslan, just one together. Well, it'll be the western side of the globe kind of thing. Nice.
And then I'm also doing the maps I don't really know yet, for the Katai expansion. So I know for sure we're
very excited for
Shogun
will be
like. I think we're doing it in a different order in the sense that, like, with the core 7th Sea, it was continent by continent by continent, and then eventually we get all of them. And I think in the Katai, it will be more like, this is everything, and then I think they may go forward and do more detail in them or something. I don't really know. So,
nice.
But yeah, it's pretty exciting. Lots to do.
Thanks a lot for your time, Mark.
Yeah, no problem.
But now, we had a nice little lineup of guests. I feel so great. This is just what I was wanting for. It's a validation. Here we are.
You're awful.
Rach, you're one of the...
What of the admin team?
Admin team, here at Breakout.
What is your main responsibility with BreakoutCon?
It's a lot of things. We wear a lot of hats.
Yep.
I am in charge of doing intake and scheduling events for the RPG Hall. We expand a little bit into scheduled board game events this year. I also triage situations as they come up. And I also organize the Breakout Indie Game Store.
That's really cool. Sorry, I come from a convention planner background, so who also dealt with programming and understands the swearing at a schedule until it makes sense. So at least that was always my tactic with it. But
yeah, I call it human Tetris.
Yeah, that's basically, I just swear it until it all tries to go together, and eventually at 3 a.m. it tends to, but as I'm sure you can relate. So what is your favorite part about running this event?
I love coming to the con and seeing everyone have such a great time and people be excited about events on the schedule.
Yeah.
They see games that they've heard about or have listened to actual play podcasts of, and this could be their first opportunity to play it because maybe they can't sell it to a local group. Maybe they don't have a local group. This is when they get to sit down and try this thing they've been excited about. That's the best.
That's amazing. Have you been with Breakout since its inception? Because it's been around 3 years now or something like that, or am I wrong?
No, this is our 3rd year. I was part of the original core admin team back when we were meeting in 2015 going, so we're going to do this, right?
We're going to do the thing.
2016 was stressful because we were sitting there going, are people going to show up? Is this just going to be an empty ballroom all weekend? And they showed up, and then more showed up, and tons of people showed up this year. It's amazing.
Well, because I think you guys had started out at like the Holiday Inn up at Yorkdale, wasn't it?
Exactly, yes.
And then now you're downtown at the Sheridan Center, which is amazing. That's got to have been a really cool...
Yeah, competing on the same weekend as Toronto Comic Con, and this place is full.
We sold out.
I love it.
Yeah, as you should. Tell me a bit about, there's a lot of stuff about Breakout specifically that I admire. What are some of the challenges that Breakout's faced and that you're doing this year? I know every table at Breakout's got an X card, and not everyone who's listening to this knows what the X card is. And would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to talk about safety tools. So the X card is something that back with Toronto area gamers, we adopted as a standardized safety tool. It's not saying that this is the only safety tool that exists. There's quite a few, and I'll touch on them in a little bit. But it's a good entryway safety tool. So the X card it's a card. It could be an index card. We have a full sheet of paper, big X pointed on it. And my standard pitch is, this is the X card. If anything makes you feel uncomfortable, ill at ease, not quite happy, not quite enjoying yourself, tap the X card. We identify what the issue is. We discuss briefly how we can best remove it from play so it helps you have fun again. And then we move on. We don't have to explore why that element is problematic. It's not a session for us to learn your deep, dark secrets or things that you're struggling or challenged by. It's just trying to make it a happier, safer place at the table for everyone.
Identify what it is, how to move forward, but not focus on the why.
Yeah, so a lot of times, and if anyone has heard me on any podcast, they probably heard this story before, but people assume that refers to events of extreme sexuality or extreme violence. I'm a registered healthcare professional. Something came up that was a little bit ethically unsound for me to talk about. It made me very nervous. Wasn't anything terribly scary, but it's who I am. I can't really talk about pharmaceuticals in that way, and we need to tap the X card and then move on from that and just not explore that any further.
It's a great way to ensure a safe space and safe environment for everybody, which I love it. I haven't actually really seen anything like that big anyways, and I love it. I thought it was just wonderful.
Yeah, with a lot of volunteers, I know many of them put an effort to make a game that is safe and accessible for all players, but you don't know the background of each of your players. You don't know what has happened to them, and the secrets that they carry with them and what can be upsetting.
It also probably would ease your anxiety, Justin, about having to play with strangers.
Well, exactly. This is actually my... it's funny because I've been playing tabletop games since high school, and I've been running this podcast for 5 years, but I've never come to a tabletop convention. I've come to conventions, but never ones that are tabletop-oriented, and certainly never played a game at a convention. I don't really see a future where I will, because I've always just enjoyed the security that comes with playing with the people I know and the friends that I have that trust built with. But even with that, there's the game Bluebeard's Bride that we've picked up that I'm hoping to bring to the show. Even with my friends, the game with that kind of content and tension, I'm going to use the X card with them just because it also in a way allows you, using that safety tool, to have a game that can exist in a realm where it might not without a card like that at the table.
Yeah, I don't know if you've opened your copy of Bluebeards yet, but there's a whole section that
they have a page on it where you actually can print out an X card from the book.
Yeah, they made an illustration of an X card.
Yeah,
cool.
and have a mini chapter dedicated to it as a way to also give the security to the GM to be able to tell a horror game that deals with some very personal and intense fears, to go into that without worry if you're going to harm your players, because we all trust that should something happen, the X card can be invoked.
Yeah.
And you don't have to keep, in that way, holding back your punches.
Yeah, Bluebeards in particular is a game that's very nuanced because it's a game of personal horror, and your reactions out of character are part of that game, and the GM has to know, is that part of the game where you're feeling uncomfortable, or was that a sensitive topic that we need to discuss briefly to make it a better table?
Yeah, in a game where you want to, like Bluebeard is a exception to many tabletop games where feeling good and having fun isn't necessarily always the goal with that game, right? You want to be afraid and uncomfortable and experience those emotions in that controlled setting. And so having essentially a safe word that can be used with the X card at the table gives everyone the ability to trust each other to navigate a very serious game, which is, I mean, Terrible Warriors has sort of got a reputation of being the comedy show, which I'm like, maybe we're going to be the trauma show next year. We'll see. But get into things like that. But it's we've played games that have been for laughs. We've also played games where we've had players who've cried and gotten upset. And it might have been, looking back at an infamous moment with Monster Hearts, have been good to have had an X card at our table those years ago. We might have prevented the walkout that happened in the middle of that game. So.
I think it's important to note that games aren't necessarily always about the pursuit of having fun. It could be about the pursuit of other emotional experiences. My friends and I were struggling a little while back because people were asking us, do you play games to have fun? I like to phrase it as, we play games to enjoy ourselves, and that could be experiencing particularly intense emotions that are interesting to experience in a fictional sense, where we have a bit of a buffer, but it's not necessarily, it's a type of fun, but it's not fun, we're all having a great time and laughing.
It's like, I was up earlier at the panel, Blood on the Floor on horror. It's that RPGs can be a form of therapy, but also, like, we're not going to watch Get Out to have fun. We're watching Get Out to experience a story and a frame of mind and terror in that controlled environment. And that afterwards, it can be an enjoyable experience, but it doesn't have to be that you're not having fun necessarily, especially in a horror game, or in all forms of fantasy or in drama. We don't watch only comedies, right? There's different genres that count as enjoyment. That doesn't have to be the quote positive emotions.
Yes. I do hesitate, and I just want to signpost as a medical professional. I don't think we should be necessarily using the term of therapy in the context of games. However, games can be a tool that help us explore different parts of our personality and come to terms with, these are experiences where I feel scared. These are experiences where I have intense anxiety. I have characters I've created that are about exploring those facets of my personality because I want to understand myself better. It's not medical therapy, but it is something I do for myself, as self-growth.
Yeah, self-exploration, looking at things in a different light, sort of.
Exactly.
So, bring back here to Breakout. Here we are now into the third year, and we're partway through the Saturday day.
How many people are here approximately? Do you know? Do you have a ballpark?
I think it's about 1,400, including volunteers and staff.
Amazing. That's so good.
That's amazing. That is incredible. How has this year been, and
where do you see it going?
Where do you see it going in both the hobby and the community, but also Breakout in particular?
This year has been fantastic. We have dozens of guests who have come up and are showcasing their games. Getting role-playing games up into Canada sometimes presents a challenge just because of distribution. So we brought up a lot of Americans. That's one of the benefits of the store is we have Bluebeard's Bride, for example, on sale, and I don't think as of right now, it's actually carried in any Toronto stores. I have a copy, but I backed the Kickstarter, right?
It's also sold out right now down there.
I got the last copy. Sorry, everyone.
Legitimately, it's already gone.
He's not wrong. But it's getting people to go out and meet the creators of their games and having those discussions. And I love the growth that builds in the community, because I like to think of us as a community of creators. I host a podcast called Plus One Forward, which is about the Powered by the Apocalypse community. Ooh. And I'm all about, take those games, rip them apart, build something new. You are part of this design community. You're part of the discussion. And I feel Breakout really reaches out to make players have that feeling to be, here's games that exist, here's panels we have to talk about making your thing real. And Kate started the mentorship program this year, which is an opportunity for local designers to buy a ticket and have the guests come play their game and then give them constructive feedback to help them make their game a little bit more polished and ready for market.
That's amazing. That's a really cool program. Have you heard any feedback from that so far? You said this is the first year. So.
It's the first year. Kate could give you a little bit more information about that, but overall, from what I've heard, it's been very positive and life-affirming.
Only imagine. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, there's a palpable excitement in the air when you're walking around, and it does feel like
there's a golden age of tabletop happening right now, where it wasn't always this accessible and this popular. And now here we are, like in the broad daylight, rolling dice and telling stories.
It's great because we're meeting people like you who are creators in the Southern Ontario community. It's not. We don't all have to go to Gen Con to Indianapolis to go meet each other.
It's a really long drive, thank you.
It is 8 hours. It is not a great drive, trust me.
We did it last year, and then I went to work the next day, and I'm like, oh God, why did I do this?
I drive to Magfest.
I did that as well. It's awful.
I've driven to Magfest 10 hours. I love long-distance driving. Let's go to Gen Con. But you mentioned your podcast. Do you want to give a shout-out to that show?
Yeah, so
we love Powered by Apocalypse Games. So
I get a co-host of Plus One Forward with Rich Roberts. We're part of the Gauntlet Network. As part of Plus One Forward, we explore parts of Powered by the Apocalypse systems, how they work, how they contrast against each other, and give GMs and players ideas and thoughts on how to make the most out of their games. And we also interview creators who are bringing their games to market, either games that are already released or games that are kickstarting right now, that might grab your attention. It's a way to sort of filter out, is this game the right one for me? Because it's not always clear on a Kickstarter page. Like, it's using this system, but what parts of this system is it using? What parts of Powered by the Apocalypse? What does that mean to that creator? Because there's no standardized document. It means something different to everyone.
It's almost an ideology as much as a rule set.
You're not wrong.
In terms of the way it's written. And I know, like Vincent Baker has posted about it on his own blog about, like, what is Powered by the Apocalypse? He goes, it's kind of whatever you want it to be, but using that original model and then changing it and adapting it and hacking it however you need.
Yeah, and I love looking at the different games because you can definitely see what parts of Apocalypse World sung to those designers, what parts of Dungeon World or Monster Hearts. There's certain games that, like the Sprawl, which really loves countdown clocks and uses them for mechanics.
Everything has a countdown clock. The corporations have countdown clocks. It was which really felt true to that environment. And then and you get to something like Masks, which is, there's no clocks, but it's all about the playbooks.
And it's about the stats moving, and what does that mean?
And keeping things fluid. And then with Monster Hearts and Worldwide Wrestling, all about strings and heat. And it's all about collecting those tokens between players that then become a currency in the game.
I don't know if you had the opportunity yet to have a look at Jason Pitt's Circles of Power, but that game is all about the pick list option. Like when you roll 10 plus, pick 3. When you roll 7 to 9, pick 2. That is the focus of that game.
That's really cool.
Well, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look into it because it is overwhelming. There are always going to be more games I can ever look into, and just coming here to Breakout, I'm realizing we've got a lot of work ahead of us to give a cross-section of what's going on.
But again, Breakout is this unique opportunity to spotlight people because we have so much space to run games. Yeah. It's not like going to other conventions where there is one game designer, and that might be the one game designer at that convention that you know about locally. I mean, you get to get a glimpse of how broad the community is right now and all the amazing ideas.
Yeah, you can go to other conventions and play Adventure League.
Yeah.
And you can play Adventure League at Breakout.
But there's also so many other things you can play.
You could also spend the entire weekend and never talk about Dungeons & Dragons at all. So it's
really cool.
It's something else. Rach, thanks again for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Derek Chung, Nomnisaur Wrangler.
Yes, that is my official title, and what I call myself, even though I'm technically, or at least other people tell me I'm technically the president of my own company, Nomnisaur Games.
There's a business card that says you're president.
I mean, sure, but I still prefer Nomnisaur Wrangler. Nomnisaur Games is a company I started less than a year ago, actually, and we've been burning the midnight oil, the daytime oil, every type of oil to get our first game for the Emberwind title out. And Breakout has actually where we've taken our baby that we've unofficially been working on 10 years now to debut. And this is a super interesting game that we're hoping to not only push on its own, but have it support our company as not only a game or not only a developer and producer of tabletop games, but an asset to the community. Nomnisaur Games isn't currently offering this, but we're looking to become kind of like the indie dream where we help everyone that's coming up with all these great ideas to produce their games, manufacture and develop them, and even distribute them.
So Emberwind is both a game that you've created, but also a proof of concept on how to put it through the pipeline to then create your own game using the methods you've used to create Emberwind.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Beyond that, Emberwind actually models a bit of that too. It's not just publishing. We are looking to do more than that. If people aren't at the stage where they're ready to publish and they need external reviews or just the ability to chat with and locate.
So from concept to creation to production.
To finding a proper
really
team
neat.
too. Like everyone that I've worked with on this, I actually cross-advertise my website to forward more business to them.
Tell me a bit about Emberwind, because I just showed up here to Breakout, and I've had now 3 people tell me, go to the table and talk to this guy about Emberwind, because it's really neat. And
it's also really pretty.
My friend Sarah was showing me the book and opening it up, and I'm going like, yeah, okay, let's go speak to this guy. So all I have is right now the title and the artwork. So introduce me and to our listeners to Emberwind.
All right, let's actually start there. This is a really interesting project that I took on years and years ago because I wasn't satisfied with any of the tabletop experiences out there. They had extremely high bars that made it really difficult for people to get into. So we created a game that was supposed to be lighter, something that's much easier to pick up for people to play who only, let's say, have board game experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are other games out there that do that. But what they didn't deliver was the same satisfying tactical crunch of an RPG that people really liked.
So a low entry barrier, but with like some real meat to chew on when you get into the mechanics of it.
That was phase 1. This is why this game took so many years. Beyond that, we wanted
let's make it easy but incredibly complicated. It's a paradox.
It took a lot of streamlining basically to remove all that complication out, but preserve the core game, which is a satisfying, complex, customizable game, but was still very easy to play.
Yeah.
So what we end up with at the end, the point that we're at now, is a dual rule system. We have a microlight system, which takes 20 minutes to learn, to pick up, to play, where everything's already done.
That's amazing.
And we actually push it with campaign books that are completely GM-less. You don't need a GM to play.
Oh, I love GM-less games.
Oh my god, that's really cool.
And then on the opposite end, we have the full-fledged version of the game, what we are calling the Core Edition, that gives you 9 character classes, 27 subclasses that you can mix and match into 243 different combinations. So you can create whatever type of character you want, so long as it does what you want it to do, and also fulfill a useful role for the party. So, like, if you want to tank, you don't have to be the warrior in the front line tanking. You could be a mage in full plate up at the front, blocking things with absorption spells if that's the way you want to do it.
So you're both packing the Happy Meal with the toy included, but also making some fine dining steak meal where it's going to be built yourself.
And choosing your toy.
And choosing and building your toy. And so, and both of them run in parallel to each other to mix and match.
Yes, exactly.
So we could start a game in the lights rules, but convert it if we really want to get down to the nitty-gritty and play the core mode, but also revert it if I'm bringing in a new player or younger players.
It's actually a little better than that. You don't need to convert either way. Individual players can choose to convert up or down.
They just slide in and out of whatever version.
So, for example, if one of you wanted to play in the easy mode, one of you play on the hard mode, you guys can.
There are games that do quick light rules, but they tend to only be like that first adventure, and
that's all you get.
Star Trek Adventures has that with their character creation. You can create a very rudimentary character and do their quick rules story. But if you want to play more, you then have to finish the rest of your character creation and then get into the real game. And once that's done, you can't revert back to the quick start rules because they're literally a demo for the first. Your quick rules are not the demo. They're
not
a whole full game.
The full game.
Thing, And the way we do that, that's different than other games, is that we don't build horizontally or vertically in the same sense, where you basically say, well, here's level 1 content.
String theory with rules.
It's a layered theory, and I'll kind of explain that. So, like, instead of you starting at level 1 and that's your quick rules, and then as you level up, you get more stuff to play with. What we've done is we've changed the resolution of it, where you can still get the same image or experience of the game.
I like that imagery,
Yeah, but how much detail you want is up to your comfort level. So a really good example is in the Microlight, we use an action pool system where every action has a speed to it. And you use a certain amount of actions that total up to the maximum speed that you have in a turn.
Okay.
Whereas in the full system, we convert the speeds into point values, and you have a total amount of points every turn that you can vary based on how you build your character, and you can dedicate that to different types of actions. who have different costs as well as different upkeep costs and so forth, and get a really, really customized turn. But if you don't like that and don't want that, you can just
play the light version.
I mean, I'm into it just because of the amount of thought that's gone into creating a game.
It's already really
we
cool.
have certainly played our fair share of games on Terrible Warriors that have not had that time spent onto it, Shadowrun, that is more rules and stats and more tables than game at that point. Just to improve the game, sometimes developers just add more into it, and it gets more and more complicated the more stuff that gets added in, and then it just becomes just rules and flipping through reference tables. This, like, you're taking it more to a quantum level, and allowing these things to exist in both states simultaneously, which is really kind of neat.
It is kind of neat.
It's not something I've heard of before, and I wouldn't have said it was possible until you've got the book printed over there. So
I mean, that's just the first step into the world, right? And it's the reason why it took so long to develop was because we couldn't nail everything down onto one point of reference. Everything had to work together. And it definitely took a lot of that, which is again for another reason for 10 years worth of work. So that's kind of the base system in a nutshell. And there is, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of calculations, there's a lot of tables tied to this, but they're done in a way where we've separated it out from lore.
I get into arguments with players all the time. So, there are plenty of players out there who love tables and getting into statistics and knowing exactly what one weapon does over another weapon. And others who just want to do cinematics and be not even have to worry about an inventory and just have it if they can justify having it in the moment. And it's a challenge to either decide if you're going to support that way of thinking or not, or find a way to compromise between those two realms.
We found an answer to kind of each of those questions. The core game is resoundingly and uncompromisingly a tactical game, and it's not like a theater of mind thing. If you want a full experience, you're going to have to play with like a battle mat, with a grid, and that's just it.
That's just how it is.
Some people like their battle mats, Joshua.
Yeah.
But we have made it a lot easier to get into than D&D. Like, a combat feels way more satisfying and only takes a third of the time.
Oh, God.
That's
Sorry.
great. Because we don't play Dungeons and Dragons that often on Terrible Warriors because one round of combat is our whole 1 hour
It's the entire
episode.
session.
We've tried to break it down the monotony of it, too, where you don't get just, a couple cool things you do once a day, and then...
and we have to do an extended rest to get my spells back. And don't forget to
I'm
drink
not wasting
water.
a spell slot on that.
Yeah, but did you pick up your health care package in Shadowrun?
Instead of that...
You remember to pay your rent? I'm bitter.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm still bitter about that game. Anyways.
Instead of that, what we've done is we've actually taken a lot of inspiration from more modern fields of games like MMOs, where classes are built up around a skill bar where you can lock in different types of actions, and we give you a giant choice of actions that you can pick and then customize your character out with.
Yeah, you have your loadout that you're going to pick for this game session.
Exactly, and you can change up that loadout between each fight and really customize how you work, both in synergy with your other skills and your other members in your party.
And so then from Emberwind, you've got Nomnisaur Games, which is like the backbone of all of this, to then work to help empower other creators to then realize their ideas.
Yeah, and where the two intersect and meet is with Emberwind, we've actually developed the rule system so that it's generic in air quotes. And I'm saying that because I know your listeners can't see me doing this, but it doesn't have set lore tied to the rules. There is lore, and we've developed a ton of different worlds you can dive into however deeply that you want. But
it's a framework, though.
But you don't need to pick up any of that. And the reason for that is because I know a lot of people can't, for example, get into D&D because they don't like fantasy, or a lot of people can't get into sci-fi because they can't do that either. Or that's all they can do, I should say.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we want to do isn't just give people the ability to play our worlds and our game our way, but our game their way. So not only is there rules customizations, we have development tools that let you guys develop whatever content you want, and if it's popular, we actually reach out to the creator of that give it the professional polish that they're happy with us doing so, and then putting it out to the community for a profit share where the creator gets money for their work.
I love this.
I love that too. That sounds like I feel like there's a lot of people who have this idea, but they don't really have the business sense or the technical know-how or like the logistics to go and create the concept they have and then realize it, right? And this sounds a way to take those steps and guide the creator to the creation. That's really neat. So where can once again where can we find your stuff online?
You can find my stuff online at amberwindgame.com and nomnivoregames.com.
Derek Chung, thank you very much for hanging out with us. I'm going to come by and get your card again and see if we can play test your game on the show later.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
See, this is the wonderful thing of when you go on location is you can just be like super spontaneous. Now I got a lineup of guests. Now I feel important. It's wonderful. Natalie, you bump into friends when you come to
This is what
Breakout.
happens.
You've already seen like a bunch of people. One person from like out of town who's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going from like Ottawa. And
That's
now
my
we
life.
are. I am going to live on tape learn your names.
Hi, I'm Allysha Tulk,
And I'm Kevin Carmichael.
and we are Dancing Giant Games. We are a design duo.
Nice. That's the best kind of duo. And later today, in like half an hour, you're doing your own panel on.
Yes. It's called the Breaking the Board Games panel. It's moderated by Daryl Andrews. I'm with Rob Davio, Nicole Hoy, Senfu Lin.
Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. We always just call him Sen.
Just Sen. That works. And so we get to just talk, answer audience questions, see what's going on, what they are asking about getting it.
What are we going to get out of the Breaking Into Board Games panel?
It's all about how to get into the industry. So how do you enter the community? What do you do at an open playtest night? So all that kind of stuff. So how did we get in? How can we help you get in?
How's Breakout been?
Good.
It's been good,
Yeah, it's been really fun. You've been volunteering a lot, so.
Well, just a little bit last night and whatnot, but, still I've gotten lots of games in and whatnot. We really enjoy this one because it's actually local for us.
Yeah.
Finally not having to travel to the States is always good.
Way better.
It's not my first convention, but it is my first tabletop-oriented convention. And I was telling Natalie earlier that I've been producing a tabletop actual play podcast for 5 years, but don't go to tabletop conventions because the idea of sitting down with a table of people I've never met and playing a role-playing game with them just like stresses me out to the whole point. I'm like, just no thanks. I just want to play with my friends.
But meanwhile, how I actually met Kevin, I don't know how I didn't meet you at this, was at the Play and Pub event last year, which was really cool because it's literally just sitting down with a bunch of people to play games that don't exist yet.
Yeah, playing
Which is
prototypes.
amazing.
Yeah, there needs to be another conversation that happens here on this show where we talk about to go or not to go to events like this.
But that's me, so.
Yeah. Because, I see our listeners who talk about finding groups through comic book shops and other things, and I'm like, that just would keep me, like, anxiety. Like, I only want to play with the people I know.
Yep, sitting down with strangers is the scariest thing, but that's how you make the best relationships.
It's very true.
And it also sounds like you get, like, completely unexpected stories that come out of
Oh,
those,
yeah,
those
100%.
games.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when we started off with the Steaks and Lattes designer nights, we didn't know anyone because we're like an hour north of here, right? So we went it down, and we had started a blog before when we did, which will be probably something you probably talk about in the Break Into Board Games panel.
Probably.
And we had someone who came up and like, introduced themselves to us. And they're like, oh yeah, we're Allysha and Kevin. Like, yeah, I know. I read your blog and everything. We're like, what? Like, we have maybe 20 people who look into that, and you're one of them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know, right?
And he already had his own published game and everything too. And we're just starting off, being like, here's our first prototype. So
speaking of then prototypes and games, where can we find the things you have created?
Things we have created you can buy online. So The Lady and the Tiger under Jelly Bean Games is currently out to buy, so that is super awesome. You should get that.
Lady and the Tiger, elevator pitch.
Yep. Lady and the Tiger, it is a box of 5 different games using the same components. So it's a bunch of micro games, all designed by different designers. It was a contest. We actually won part of the contest from our friend Peter, who runs Jelly Bean Games. What's ours about?
It's an auction game.
Yeah.
It's a simple little auction game. Basically, you will get a roll, and you are trying to collect cards that match your role or match characteristics of your role. Each card is either red or blue, or a tiger or a lady. And then basically, if you get ones that match one of those characteristics or all the characteristics, you get some points. And if you get ones that don't match any of that, they get negative points. You'll be using tokens to bid on different lots. So basically, on your turn, you're either adding to the lot or bidding on it, which is kind of like the raw kind of system there. So that's what it's mostly based on. You play over 3 rounds, and that's the game. And then there's 4 other games in there.
4 other games.
We also have our blog post. We've also got a bunch of games probably coming out next year, but nothing guaranteed thus far. Publisher talks,
Find out more at the Breaking Into Board Game panel happening at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, show up in 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
But also follow Dancing Giant Games, because then you find out about it.
Yeah, we have Twitter, which is at Dancing Giant Games. We also have our website, which is dancinggiantgames.com.
Yeah, and
it's a great visual image when you hear the name.
It
evokes.
Yeah, the Twitter's at the Dancing Giant, I think.
Okay,
because we couldn't fit Dancing Giant Games.
We'll keep on fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Good luck with the panel.
Thank you for having us.
Have a good weekend.
Yes, you as well.
We'll see you around.
My name is Christopher Ono.
I can see your name tag.
You can see my name tag.
Can't see it if you're listening.
I gotcha. And I'm the board game hall manager as well as a volunteer coordinator. So we have to make sure that the board game hall is, has the right number of people. We need to make sure that people find their games. I like to say that my main role is to make sure people have fun, but also we need to make sure that everything's running smooth.
Yeah, don't steal any pieces.
And don't steal pieces.
Please don't.
Don't break things. Make sure all the meeples are in the right place.
Yeah. Exactly.
Everything gets put back.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we also have... a lot of the people are involved in the bring and buy. They need to know where that is. A lot of people are wanting to look at the games. We need to know what's new, what's happening, what games are with the Play to Win. I don't know if you've already spoken about the Play to Win contest.
I've read about it. We haven't mentioned it on tape yet. So tell us about the Play to Win contest.
So the Play to Win contest is there's been a number of games that have been donated by developers, publishers, and designers. And usually it's 1 or 2 copies. And if you play the game, you can sign up the names of all the people who've played the game. And at 11 o'clock on Sunday, there's a draw for each copy of the game. So if you've played the game, we're going to roll a dice, depending on how many people we have. We have 30-siders, 10-siders, 12-siders. If your number's rolled, you get the game, as long as you're there.
Those are really good odds.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so, some games, there are literally about 100 people, so we're going to have to go to percentile, but...
we should have just played Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, so you didn't have to buy it.
No, I'm just going to buy that one, I know.
But that's the gist of the Play to Win. There's a couple other rules where if you teach the game, you can also qualify.
Is this your own idea, or did you take this from somewhere?
This came from... You'll have to forgive me. I'm not sure who it came from.
I'll just take the credit.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, there you go. Way better.
So, how long have you been? Have you been with Breakout for the full 3 years?
I've been out with Breakout for the full 3 years that it's been running, and then previous to that, I was part of the TABS steering committee. TABS is the board game side of this convention.
Toronto Area Board Game Society. Yeah, there we go.
And so, TAGS, the role-playing side, we came together and we said this is something that we could do with a really good amount of coordination, synergy, and get everything going.
Yeah.
So I was with TABS for about 4 or 5 years before that.
Okay.
And I've been running my own wargaming group in near Bathurst and Eglinton since 2005.
Oh, I might be moving there in 2 months, so we'll see. Maybe I got a new group to hang out with. What's Breakout been like for you, and over the 3 years here and where we are now? Because we were just saying with Rach about how exciting this year really feels.
It's really exciting. It's I hesitate to say it, but it almost feels like it's twice as big. We've been expanding really quite a bit every year, and I think this is obviously the biggest year yet. Lots of people. We anticipated a lot of people. We even had contingency plans to get more than those anticipated people, and we've had to use the contingency plans.
Oh, fun.
So
that's a good problem to have. That's a nice problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm feeling really great about it. One of the interesting things is back when I was a teen, I was doing role-playing games. I bought a game called Role-Playing Mastery, I think, by Gary Gygax.
Okay.
And they're talking about how you start in your own little group and then you expand outwards. And I never got out of my own little group. Mm-hmm. And so here, 20, 30 years later, after I first started role-playing, we're expanding out, becoming maybe not a regional force, but certainly a local city force. So I'm really excited about it.
It's amazing. So you also you coordinate all the volunteers for this. How has that been? You got to convince people to not play games constantly and instead help you out with this.
I think one of the things about board gamers is that because there's not as much setup time and prep time involved, a a lot of people don't realize how much time is involved to do this kind of volunteer work, and to get this quick convention organized. So the board gaming side is a little harder to find volunteers for, so I'm very grateful for the volunteers we have.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people think these things pop up magically. And,
they seem like they do.
But
they seem like they do to me.
I know, but the role-playing
pop-up
side, like I have to hand it to Kate and Rob and Rach. They have it hands down. It's awesome. We're still kind of working on our side of things. We're hoping to kind of get that ramped up. We had literally twice as many volunteers this year than we did last year, so that's fantastic. I'm hoping that we keep on getting those numbers, and it's really helpful.
What's been your favorite thing about this weekend so far?
My favorite thing about this weekend has been just how excited everyone seems. Like it's just like really to see a lot of positive, Kate and I go by each other in the hall and we high-five each other. It's just really good.
Well, we get here and we get a little care card going like, we love you, you're welcome to have a great time, don't forget to drink.
As somebody who is like, I've run conventions for a number of years and then also I've attended so many over the years, that was like the first time I've ever gotten that. I'm like, this is the most adorable, but also like, I already feel welcome just being here.
But
and that's
also,
like 2 seconds in.
You will forget to drink water. When you're walking around, then my lips are starting to get a little chapped right now, and I'm like,
that water table
I've got my bottled water in my bag, and certainly there are like basic survival habits that you just forget when you're having a really fun time on the weekend. Oh, right, we talked 3 hours ago about going to get lunch, and now it's 5 o'clock. So,
well, I hope you can get lunch soon.
We're probably gonna go get something now.
My name is Sarah Richardson. I am the author of Velvet Glove, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse World game about girl gangs in the 1970s. And I am co-author of Bluebeard's Bride, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse World game of feminine horror. I'm currently an employee of Magpie Games. I'm their marketing director. And I'm also the resource director for the Indie Games Developer Network.
We have a lot to talk about.
Where do we begin?
Where do we begin? We're here at Breakout to meet the people that make our games, and we've certainly been playing Magpie Games recently. We just wrapped up our Last Best Hope.
Awesome.
And it was bonkers. Masks is one of the most fun I've had on and off the show, as we have a character we created from another game that now want to translate into this telenovela game that's just been showing up on Magpie.
Passion de la Passions.
Which sounds incredible.
Sounds hilarious.
And certainly Bluebeard's Bride has been in the research and development phase for a while now. I want to play this game, but also feel responsible to be responsible about this game when we present it. Magpie is an interesting company, as you were saying earlier in another panel. It's a minority-owned company.
Yes, we're a majority minority-owned company. So Magpie Games was founded by Marissa Kelly and Mark Diaz-Truman. Brendan Conway is the other owner. And then we expanded in a couple of years ago to include myself, and Derek, who is our shipping manager.
Where are you guys based out of?
The majority of Magpie is in Albuquerque. I am the lone wolf out in Chicago, enjoying the Chicago winters while they enjoy the Albuquerque warmth. Brendan is actually just now moving there as we speak.
To Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Okay, not to Chicago.
No. He was in New Jersey, so it's going to be a big change.
Oh yeah, that would be. Oh my goodness.
That'll be a nice just climate shock. Magpie has some interesting missions that you're out to prove and do and stand up for, and you're certainly fighting a good fight and trying to enable new creators and new voices to bring them into this hobby.
Pioneering the way a little bit too, just because it's been so dominated, I think, otherwise by white males, as we've discussed on the way up here, for so long. So it's really cool seeing people know, F this, we are changing the environment, we're changing the community, and supporting people. I was listening to about there is a fund or something like that that's being developed to help send people to events so that way they can learn and experience and grow and develop those games that they need to be able to develop to get themselves out there. And I thought that was incredible. So,
well, that's part of the Indie Game Developers Network.
Yeah.
which Magpie and a couple of other game companies founded, but now it's many more people.
Yeah.
So the IGDN is kind of like a loose trade organization of indie game developers.
Okay.
And I first got involved in it whenever they did the scholarship that you're referring to, the Metatopia scholarship, where they send new game developers who are of minority status to Metatopia, which is a convention in New Jersey where you go and it's all about playtesting games. Mm-hmm. It's not like a normal convention where it's aimed at the consumers. This is more like inward facing.
I've been to a Protospiel, so I've got a vague idea. I heard of Metatopia actually, so.
It's like that.
Yeah.
So the first year they sent me, and then every year after we've been able to send more and more people.
Which is amazing.
So like last year, we sent 8 people, including some people who are here that hopefully you'll get to talk to later.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really cool. So how did you get involved with anything, period? You do so many things, it sounds like.
I mean, everybody has a different path. So for me personally, like I played RPGs growing up, kind of like off and on, depending on if I could find a group. And then I started freelancing in the industry a couple of years ago, and I was only doing illustration and graphic design. Until the fateful day when it was like, hey, there is this Hacking as Women workshop at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Which, as I've told the story, that's actually where Bluebeard's Bride started.
That's cool.
We kind of came up with it in a limited time workshop as like, hey, so if we were going to make a game, it would be based on this dark fairy tale, and it would be really dark, and you'd probably die. And people are like, yes, we want that. So that's
feedback.
Yeah, we're like, okay. So that's how the 3 authors got together and started developing the game, and then Magpie was like, hey, we would like to help you print that and run the Kickstarter and everything.
That's amazing. So Magpie also will run Kickstarters for their games.
Yes.
Okay.
We are running a Kickstarter right now.
That's exciting.
This very moment.
Tell us about it.
So we're currently running a Kickstarter for Cartel. Cartel was made by Mark Diaz-Truman as kind of a homage to his Mexican-American heritage. Mm-hmm. So for the game, think kind of like Breaking Bad plus El Mariachi. In that, powered by the Apocalypse World, because that's, or the Apocalypse Engine, that's the games we make. Mm-hmm. But so you play people who are intertwined with a drug cartel. Like you might play the cook, you might play El Jefe, who is in charge of everything. You might play someone's spouse.
I love this already.
But it's not actually about the drugs and the violence.
Yeah.
Like those happen. But in the actual game is about like torn loyalties. You're kind of pulled between this cartel that you belong to and also perhaps having a normal life. Perhaps you have children, perhaps you have family that doesn't know you're part of the cartel. And so you're trying to balance all of this while things go horribly, horribly wrong.
It's like the game of life, but meets like, just really bad life choices.
Yeah. In Breaking Bad, I heard described as instead of character development, it's like watching a character fall through an elevator shaft in slow motion over the course of 4 years.
So that's interesting because, so in Breaking Bad, you have the argument that Walter White is not actually the main character. I mean, he is. Yeah. He's not a hero.
No.
He is the villain of the piece. And then
he's just perhaps in the focus of the frame all the time.
Yes, and you watch him degrade into less than a horrible person, but maybe he was that all along, and this is just the chance to expose. And then you have Skylar, who's unlikable, but is doing everything she can to keep her family safe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have those
She's
same kind of dynamics.
She's always posed as the antagonist, but if you actually write down what is going on, nothing she's doing is unreasonable. It's Walter who's being the unreasonable, horrible human.
Walter is an asshole from the beginning. And it's a lot
even
about...
before his diagnosis.
He is. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is performative masculinity going on. Obviously, I've watched too much of the show.
The resentment he has over not being in the company he founded and being stuck as a teacher with a family and a house and a kid.
Threatened that his brother-in-law offers to take care of his family for him because he's not enough of a provider. And that's what leads to great moments like him saying, "Say my name."
Yeah.
It's all about him trying to reclaim his masculinity. So in a mirror to that, you have Skylar, who is this very like nurturing character who's just, I will do anything to protect my children. But I've gone on tangent. So
Cartels, come on.
Cartel.
This is the thing is I know there are people in contributors to our own show who have taken a pass on Cartel because they've just seen the surface of it and they see it as caricatures, maybe not in good taste, but
sorry,
but it's. And I try to have these conversations with them because I've been also following the creators and people like Kate and the conversations that I've had around this game, and that there is a layer into that game, and the stories that are being told are not about the stereotypes and the caricatures, that those are the images that are thrust upon those particular playbooks, but don't represent the character you're actually going to be exploring.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. It's like our current American culture, since we're in Canada. Yeah. Current American culture, the discussion around race, especially the Latino community, is super toxic and super difficult. And that's why, like, from the inside looking out, watching the argument of, whenever I play the game, they're not stereotypes, they are people. And there's something about having to acknowledge that these are people making difficult choices is something that we're hoping will actually break down some stereotypes. Aside from the fact, a sentiment that I've seen echoed a couple of places, but also Mark, the creator, has said, is we need to allow people of marginalized voices and marginalized communities to be able to have not quite awesome people. Like, they need bad people too in their media in order to fully see them and accept them as full, complex people. So it's like, you're playing Mexicans specifically who are doing bad things, but that doesn't make them bad people.
Exactly.
And it's an exercise in empathy and understanding, while at the same time cringing at your own choices and acknowledging that they're yours. Like,
you are making them.
The first time I played it, I was Sicario, and so I ended up in a terrible situation with all these cops, and we got into a shootout.
Oh, God.
And then my coworker, who is playing the double-crossing cop, showed up, and he's like, okay, so I have to choose Cartel or the police force.
Yeah.
And he chose the Cartel, and he killed a cop.
Oh, God.
To save my character.
To save you.
Yeah. Out of the loyalty that these characters have developed.
That's where the loyalty came from.
But at the same time, he's kind of like, well, you're going to pay for that later.
Yeah.
So there was nothing good or easy or stereotypical about the situation. It felt like they were real people who had a long-standing relationship, and he made a bad call. And he did it partially to save his own ass.
But we've been talking, there was an article I read recently on playing to lose and playing to lift, and taking your characters to not just be a character that always makes the right decision, and that allowing a character to, miss their important meeting and to sleep in and to, be hungover or to make truly reprehensible decisions that are going to have consequences down the line, but also to allow that to be like that's where the character's story is going to, do that also in a way to help elevate the other stories at the table, and you don't. With that mindset, it's not about winning or losing, and playing that adversarial tabletop game where the story is being told. And the story doesn't win or lose, even if your character makes the bad call and loses. The player allowing the character to make the bad decision and still sort of playing to let the story win.
Yeah, I mean, I play with a couple of people who regularly choose to play to lose. And they acknowledge it, and they're just like, we're going to do this. Like, we're going to go in this because trying to always be the hero and always make the right choice, that's not always the most interesting story.
No.
Pro wrestling's known that for a century. You need a jobber in the ring who's going to be there to take the fall to make the hero look good. And that's normally the role of the NPC, but how much interesting is that when it's another PC at the table?
Yeah, exactly. And you're able to just bring a lot more to that relationship whenever it's not the NPC, when it's PC and PC.
Yeah.
It's a lot more personal, I think, too, when it's a PC. So
to bring it back into Bluebeard's Bride, I have heard with
talking about villains.
Well, Cartel is using the author's background and that world to tell these stories about these characters. Bluebeard's Bride, written by 3 women, telling a story that's it's not just horror; it's feminine horror, and it's a story about body and agency and safety and that being brought into that realm as well. And I've seen a lot of the controversy around Cartel that wasn't replicated with Bluebeard's Bride because it was a fantasy element, right? So it's just a fairy tale, and this interesting imaginary line that some posters don't, they make a line between this is okay and this is not okay, and I've just seen parallels drawn in those conversations.
So I think it's a really interesting conversation to have, to be like, Bluebeard is okay because it's clearly fantasy.
It's clearly not real.
And Cartel is not okay because it's based on a real place in a time that's too close to our time.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of fallacy in that argument. Like, it would have been easy to set Cartel in a fake Mexican city.
Like the Seventh Sea with Thea, and it's not Europe, it's Thea.
Right. Like, that's a really easy choice to make. A harder
make
choice...
it one step removed from reality, and then it's not... I mean, that's the trick that Star Trek's done for decades, is it's not about race relations because they're white on one side, black on the other. So now we're not blaming the white viewers who are watching at home, right? You take that one step removed.
Exactly. Like, if we took Cartel and, we put it in a fantasy setting or a not real setting, it would not be the same game. So there are times when using metaphor is the only way to really get something across, and that's what Bluebeard's Bride does, is it uses metaphor to describe, we use a haunted house to talk about what it's like, in some cases, to be a woman in a society that's informed by institutional sexism. If we took Cartel and put it in a fake city, it would be too easy for people to be like, yeah, I'm a drug dealer.
To jump into those stereotypes and then to just run with it and then not have the repercussions of dealing with this is real.
Whereas by putting it in a real city, in a real time, you have to deal with the fact that you are interacting with a system that destroys your own community. But somehow maybe that's the best choice you can make. And it's not an easy question, it's not an easy game to play, and sometimes that's what we end up making.
I'm kind of still in love with it, though, because that sounds really awesome.
I'm asking these questions because they're questions that have been asked to me that I haven't had answers for, but I'm really excited about what I've seen with Cartel, and in my head wondering how to bring that into our format and try it. Just like with Bluebeard's Bride, I'm looking forward to playing the game, but personally don't feel comfortable being the one to present it on our show as a guy playing this game where I'm going to have all of my female players around the table and I'm just going to torment them for 4 hours. That sounds like I might be playing with fire.
That is a thing that's been brought up a lot. You're not the first male-identified individual to say to me you don't feel comfortable running the game.
I do feel comfortable running the game in a closed environment in a private room. I don't feel comfortable broadcasting myself presenting the game as the authority voice, right? There was the panel we went to this afternoon where there was can men play this game? And should
I
they?
may have raised my voice during the panel.
Yes. Of course. And in a way, important that I do, but I'm still wrestling with should I be the one to run the game? I'll definitely be a player in it, but to run the game on the show and what is going to help present it in the most effective way to a listener that's only going to get potentially that one chance to listen to us.
Well, I will say that I understand your hesitation. And I don't want to dismiss it or belittle it or anything. But I think there's also a bigger issue here, which is whenever you decide that certain games are not you're like, these are so precious, I can't run it effectively. Whenever you push games made by women about women's experiences into that label, you're pushing us into this like pink ghetto.
Into this other category.
You're saying that there is something about this that means this game is not for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I would argue to you that men can run this game, they can play this game, they can represent this game. We made this game for everybody, and everybody has different individual experiences. There are women out there who do a terrible fucking job of running this game. Just like there are some men who could run it with a sensitivity and attention to detail that would creep me the fuck out. I want to meet these people, but so you have to balance the idea of pushing us and holding us to this like up on a pedestal where we can't become the norm versus being respectful to the subject matter.
Yeah, and so the hesitation is currently in the form of just ongoing conversation. As I read the rules and I speak with the people that we're going to be playing with, figuring out. Also, I run fucking every game on the show now, and I'm looking for other people who would be willing to run these games as well. Because I have found the more people we have running games on our podcast, the more interesting our stories become. We don't end up just repeating certain lessons. So
it's also incredibly important for women to see other women running games. Yes, so it's like
not to really speak out loud there, but
please. So I definitely don't want to discourage any women from running it, especially from running on your game. Like that's connected to and part of the idea of making the games more normalized is we need to have more women running games. Like I did not run a game until I saw a bunch of women running games. I'm like, maybe I can do that. And just like I just said, going to a workshop that was specifically aimed at women making games, that was the first time I was like, I can make a game.
I could do this thing.
I could do this thing. Look at this.
Yeah, look at you.
And then I was like, oh wait, I like this. Maybe I want to do more of this. So definitely, I think the answer is more women running games and more dudes running games that make them seriously uncomfortable and have to examine their everyday privilege. Like, this is okay, yes. This is good, and we want this. Sorry.
That's like the perfect tagline period, like right there. I'm like, that explains that. That's everything.
I got my soundbite. So from Magpie to Bluebeards to Sarah.
Yeah.
How has it been like both helping to market and create games, but also then write for them yourself now, and seeing a game that you've written with both Velvet Glove and co-written with Bluebeard's Bride, and now people are playing that game and creating stories in a framework that you've set out. Like, you built a sandbox, and then people start putting sandcastles in that box. What's that like? I've never created a game, I just play them all. So what's it like when we go in and we mutate your creations into whatever it is we end up with?
It's a fucking amazing feeling. Like, there's the one part where finally publishing Bluebeard means I can let go. Yeah. Like, these are your stories now. I am not in charge. You go do your thing, and I'm going to sit back here and marvel at the beauty that you're making by yourself.
Like, that's the universe, and now
sounds
it's
like your kid's gone off to college.
Yes,
it's
like,
very
you're not
much
my
like
that.
Anymore.
I mean, it's a bit like that. It's definitely like there was this feeling during the development process where it's like, this is our game. Mm-hmm. And now it's your game, and so we're not going to... So it's cool. Whereas with Velvet Glove, right now, it's totally bizarre to read that people are playing it, because there's a part of my design brain that's like, it's not done, how can you play it?
How could you be doing this right now?
I've seen a physical printout copy of it at 401 Games.
That is an ash can.
Yeah, but it's there. It's only like 12 pages, but...
It's more than that.
Some of them are very thin, but I think that one does have more.
It's 50 pages.
It's I know. More than 12 pages.
It comes out. I didn't see it at first, and I've seen
I only know that because in addition to designing Velvet Glove, I wrote and laid out the ash can. So there's a lot of me there. But why
are you playing this? It's not finished. It's still growing.
My baby can't go off yet.
So that's the thing. It's completely playable. Mm-hmm. Other people are playing my game and talking about it and doing stuff with it.
And how much of their feedback is going to influence its development into not ash can?
A lot. Like that kind of feedback is super valuable, and they've made me have to think about and consider things that I would not have done alone. I love the feedback that pointed out that the terms I use for race are confusing in other cultures. So whenever I say, what was it? Because of all the choices you have, there's one I use that signaled to them Indian while I was thinking Japanese.
Oh, okay.
So different cultures, the way they view race is something I have to look at it. And of course, the view of actual gender and the fact that in the game, you have to play a person who has a female body and how to handle that. Like, these are all things that I am still working on. So getting feedback on that stuff is like super valuable. It's so,
even being said in the 70s, it
Yes.
doesn't remove the understanding we have in 2018.
Well,
So-
trans people existed in the 70s.
Even if they weren't written about in media in the 70s, right? It was still there, and so you can't just write from the perspective of the 70s either. If you're going
Right.
to set
It
it
has
back
to be,
there,
yeah.
or you're just closing your.
And so many of the stories end up gay. I mean, there is a lot of gayness, and I love it. It's so happy. It makes me so happy. But that was treated a different way in the 70s,
Yes.
in America specifically.
Yes.
So watching other people make their own stories, even with an unfinished game, is still like the most amazing feeling it's just so weird. It's so awesome. Like, I don't know what to do with that.
So it
feeling.
is as weird as I think it is.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
weird.
It's probably weirder than I imagined.
Find somebody to like bottle it and then keep it forever. It'd be
It's a
amazing.
good feeling. Or I have to keep making games. Like, whatever.
I mean, whatever.
Where can we find? I mean, we can find Magpie online. I tweeted out. Where can we find Sarah?
Well, Magpie is magpiegames.com. I have a slightly outdated website that I need to fix at scorcha.net.
Sarah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
A little over time there, but
Sorry.
It was one of those conversations where I just didn't want it to stop. So
I'm a talker.
yeah.
That's why I'm the marketing person.
Well, they do what they were doing. Part 2 of the Terrible Warriors visit to BreakoutCon is next Tuesday. And special thanks to this week's interview guests, Mark Richardson, Rach Shekley, Derek Chung, Allysha Tulk and Kevin Carmichael, Christopher Ono, and Sarah Richardson. If you want to learn more about those people and where you can find their works, check the show notes in this episode. They're all printed out there. It's a little more detailed than a normal week because we had so many amazing people on. Next week on our part 2 of our visit to BreakoutCon, we have conversations with Misha Bush-Yeager of Black Girl Gameworks and New Agenda Publishing and her amazing games, Nightingales and Arun. It's a great conversation. You don't want to miss it. Camden Wright, the creator of One Child's Heart, Jane Gates from Green Ronin, Jess Bradshaw of Extra Life Toronto, and Kate Bullock, one of the members of the Breakout Admin team and gaming blogger. And of course, special thanks to BreakoutCon for inviting us to the convention. We had a fantastic time. If you want to find out all the information, again, on all of the guests that are on this show, check out the show notes. Click those links. Give them your love. And we'll return to you next Tuesday with part 2 of our visit to BreakoutCon right here on the Terrible Warriors.